All right. Thank you all for coming. So this week, the Chamber stands on the verge of breaking a record, and not one that this body should be proud of. For nearly 6 decades, Republicans and Democrats have put politics aside when it's come to the National Defense Authorization Act, known as the NDAA. Regardless of the inherent political disagreements between both of our parties, the NDAA has long been considered a sacred process. But that will change this week. Not in the Senate, where it passed bipartisan, but in this House. And I want to give you 2 reasons why. First, the bill is packed with poison pills to appease this new Socialist Democrat Party. Cuts troops funding. Makes cuts to our military personnel accounts, the same accounts that fund troop pay, benefits, and housing. Makes America less safe. Cuts essential programs and capabilities needed to keep a competitive edge over China and Russia, such as hypersonics. And it closes Gitmo. It seeks to close Gitmo's facility, which would create a pathway to relocating known terrorists to the U.S. soil. Second, the Democrats' partisan process is egregious on the rejection of a common commitment to our troops. In those 6 decades, Democrats and Republicans have both been in the majority at times, and they always put the troops first. This year it does not. Overwhelmingly, the amendments are partisan. Let me just give you an example. In this year's NDAA on the House floor, 439 amendments were made in order. Of those 439 amendments, 283 are Democrat amendments and 62 are Republican. 64% are Democrat amendments. Compare that to the last term when Republicans were in the majority. In the FY19, 271 amendments were made in order. 155 were Democrats and 116 Republican. Yes, with the Republican in the majority, we made 57% of the amendments in order to the minority party, the Democrats. In the FY18 year, there were 210 amendments. There were 106 Democrat amendments made in order and 104 Republicans. It was 50 and 49, pretty equal. But again, more Democrat amendments made in order with Republicans in the majority. This is a total change in what this body has done for the last 60 years. When you look across the chamber to the Senate, they have an NDAA that passed with 86 votes. A bipartisan bill, such as in the term before, more than 300 votes on a bipartisan NDAA vote, almost 400. But I really want to draw attention to is probably the most shameful act that I have seen. What this new Socialist Democrat majority party just did to Joe Wilson of South Carolina. Joe has a bill, the Military Surviving Spouse Equity Act. It has 365 co-sponsors. Nearly the entire House, Joe Wilson worked on this bill, went individually to members to get them to co-sponsor a bill. Not just say they would support it, but to co-sponsor this bill. This bill would make it easier for spouses of service members who have died to receive military benefits. If you know, at the beginning of this Congress, there was a lot of discussion about changing the process of this Congress. The bill was set to be the first qualifying for the consensus calendar. Remember that? It was one of the reforms the House Democrats promised. They promised before she was elected Speaker that she would create one that said it was intended to help to open the House floor up to the bills that everyone agreed upon. Those were the rules. That's what Joe Wilson worked towards, believing that the rules actually meant something. Turns out that was just another broken promise. This week, they stripped the language from Joe Wilson, discarded his legislation, and stuck it into a partisan NDAA that our conference won't support. They put it into a bill that Joe Wilson can't even support now. After he did all this work, after they made the promise, not just to the members of Congress, but to the American people that they were going to open this up. He abided by the rules, and when he was able to achieve it, they decided to change the rules. The majority has reached a new low. I know I sit here and talk about legislation, and then I watch the news. A lot of the talk is about the war within this new Socialist Democratic Party. It's interesting, in a few short months, I watched the speaker and a lot of those freshmen smile on the cover of the Rolling Stone magazine. And now I'm just watching stones being thrown at one another. We have real problems in America that we have to solve. I know they have real challenges within their own conference. But to take 60 years of bipartisanship making troops come first because they can't get along, to make something become partisan to appease a socialist wing of the party, to strip, when they brought through a new law of a consensus calendar, but to strip the bill because the individual happens to be a Republican, goes against all low levels that I've seen within this body before. So when it comes to our national security, our differences should be checked at the door, and troops should always come before politics. Let's open up for questions. Yes, Chad.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good.
So the president is threatening these ICE raids. Two-part question. If they do start Sunday, was Congress given sufficient time? As you know, he had talked about this in June and said 2 weeks. We're over that window. And number two, even if they do go forward, is that appropriate as people are going to church and sanctuaries of worship to go and try to arrest them when they are going for faith services?
You have two parts to your question. The first part of the question, when the president said prior that these would go forward, remember first what these are. These are individuals who have crossed the border in recent years and either received a deportation order from a judge or failed to appear before court. This isn't just picking something out. We are a rule of law country, and this is following the rule of law. Now, the president said he would go forward because you had a judicial system make a decision. But he said he would pause to let Congress act. The question that Chad raised to me, isn't enough time. Tell me one thing that this majority has done in the amount of time that the speaker called the president and asked him to delay it. Has there been a hearing? Has there been a bill produced? Have we asked to stay over a weekend and solve this problem? I think if the president actually saw the House actually taking action, he'd probably delay even further to make sure the problem gets solved. The true question is, I hope you ask the speaker when she's here, what has she done? What have we done to actually solve this problem? She asked the president to delay it, and he said he would. Would you take some action? It is the speaker who is causing this problem. Yes.
What about the second part, Mr.
I answered the second part first.
But you have people going to church. That's an appropriate, I mean, that's...
I don't know the time that they'll go through. What I do know is individuals who are here that have an order from a judge that came here illegally or have failed to appear in court when they're having their day in court, they have an order to leave the country. I don't know if that happens on Sunday. I don't know if that happens on Monday or Tuesday. They know they have the order. So if I got an order from a court, I would uphold believing in America and the rule of law when that action takes place. I don't know the day that it takes place, but if you are come to this position, you've been here years, you've gone through a court system, you've been found that you need to be that you have to be deported, you have to follow the rule of law.
Your district is cleaning up after an earthquake. Steve Scalise's district is in the path of a very serious hurricane. Do you think there's adequate federal funding right now to address issues from those natural disasters, or do you see the need possibly in the near future for another disaster aid package?
Currently, when I check, there is money there to deal with the current situation. Now, knowing after these situations go through, you assess the amount of damage. Inside Ridgecrest, there is a China Lake Naval Weapons Center. Inside the NDA, I proposed an amendment for $100 million. They haven't been able to assess all the damage yet. I know we've got flooding going on here. It's usually after those assessments come back we will take. But at this current moment, to deal with what's happening right now, they tell me there is enough money in there. But we will have to reassess it based upon when the valuations come back in. Yes.
The president's expected to issue an executive order today to add the citizenship question to the census. Do you think that that's appropriate for him to take executive action, or do you think that Congress is the one that really needs to move to make that happen?
I think the president has the right to do it. Supreme Court actually said that in the process, if you read it. For more than 150 years, this question has been there one way or another in a long form. or a short form. I think the census only comes around once every 10 years. We ask numerous amount of questions. I think this is data that we have a right to know and should know.
What do you think the
Yes.
rationale is, though, to add it? Is it, because the president has said it has to do with redistricting, that's the total population, though, it doesn't have to do with citizenship.
I think from a questionnaire and the number of questions you ask, we should know, especially when you have to deal with a problem. Our challenge is that you want to know how many people are in your country. You want to know how many people are citizens or not, especially when we're dealing with different pieces of legislation. You got to have the correct number. You got to know how to deal from healthcare, supplies, services, and others. There's a lot of questions in there that you're going to ask, and I think this is an appropriate question to ask. Yes.
On the debt ceiling, there's credible estimates that it could be breached in early September. Are you urging the speaker to bring a debt ceiling bill before August recess? And how are the budget cap talks going?
I met yesterday with Mnuchin and Mick Mulvaney and others, and Leader McConnell was one of the discussions. One of the discussions, too, was the debt ceiling coming and needing to take action. I think before we leave in August, we've got a challenge about immigration. We've got a debt issue, a debt ceiling. We have USMCA. These are all things we should be dealing with. Now, I understand within this new Democrat Socialist Party, they've got a big fight going on in their conference. They have real challenges to bring up the most basic things to go forward. They no longer can have a bipartisan NDA. They have to make it partisan because within their own fight. I wish, and I understand this is not just a family feud, this has now become a war. I watched a quote from Congresswoman AOC's chief of staff, questioning or asking the voters to name me one thing that the Democrats have actually been able to achieve, and question into effect this legislative mastermind, the speaker, on her process. So I know they have real fights in there and hard to achieve anything, but I will say this: we on the Republican side will work with anyone who wants to solve these problems. These are three major issues that I think America is looking at, and we would like to work and get the job done.
Speaker Pelosi put out a number of policy proposals from her members on Monday. Do you have a response to those?
What are they? I didn't see them. Policy proposals to what?
Basically, it was more oversight on ICE, on DHS. Can't remember all of them. but
Standards of care, I think.
Standards of care for children. I can't remember if there was more funding.
We just dealt with a supplemental that dealt with a lot of this. It took 58 days. It took more than 50 times did the Republicans ask to vote on this during those 60 days that the Democrats ignored. At the beginning of this, the own chairman of Homeland said there was not a crisis at the border. I'm just excited that now the Democrats realize there's a crisis. The problem is their lack of action has made the crisis worse. Their lack of action when it comes to the immigration reform has caused part of this problem as well. I'd be more excited to see people actually produce legislations or have a hearing. I know during the same crisis time, Judiciary had a hearing bringing back somebody from the Watergate era, but nothing about the border, nothing about these concerns. It concerns to me, I know they're having a problem managing this new Socialist Democratic Party. I know they have a challenge to bring something to the floor, even when they have to pull it back. If you watched what transpired when it came to the supplemental, the Senate showed once again that they could be bipartisan. Every single Democrat in their leadership voted for the supplemental. But what did Speaker Pelosi do? She continued to fight it to prolong it even longer. There was more than 80 Democrats who voted against the supplemental at the end of the day. It's a real challenge for what they're able to produce. I probably agree with AOC's chief of staff. Name me one thing that the Democrats have been able to achieve since they became the majority. I can't name one. Yes.
Yes, sir, thank you. A House Judiciary Subcommittee yesterday held a hearing on ending prohibition of marijuana. I was wondering how the GOP leadership is approaching.
I didn't see the hearing. I know members have positions on both sides within this position, and I haven't seen it. So call back to me and I'll look. Huh?
Do you see a level of bipartisanship and working together to approach this at a federal level as opposed to just the state
Depends
level?
what portion of it you're talking about. I think I've heard some bipartisanship when it comes to, many states have taken this position, so there's an issue when it comes to banking, making sure you're able to have accountability within that. I've heard a lot of bipartisanship in there. There are members on both sides of the aisle within the Republican Party. We believe in a big tent. So there's many questions you can phrase from within there. I don't know specifically which one, but yeah, they'll look at it. Yes, ma'am.
ICE officials told the New York Times that there could be some collateral deportations as a result of these raids, so people who don't have orders of removal or didn't fail to appear before a judge who get caught up in these raids because of proximity to agents. Should they be deported?
Are they here illegally? I know the focus right now is that they're focusing on people that have an order from a judge, that have had their day in court, and that's what the focus is. Thank you very much.